Chapter 54 Ambitions. I promised everyone energon goodies if they behaved while I was in Simfer. They had not even Laserbeak, and the whole ground floor of Perceptor's house was a mess. I put the twins in my room and left Ravage to make sure they stayed there, then went to help Perceptor clean up. So sorry, I said. That's all right, Perceptor replied. I stopped paying attention to them and well, it was partially my fault. Did you find your teacher? I nodded. And how was he? All right, I said. He'd heard about Searchlight. Perceptor nodded. I got a comm. From Orion. That was strange, he'd never come at me before. Hey, Soundwave, this is Orion. I hadn't even known he had my codes, though I had his. I responded silently. Hi. Can you come over here and convince Ratchet not to drop out of the academy? Ratchet had more finals than me, and probably hadn't finished them until earlier this morn. Had they gone that badly? That was hard to believe. What? He's really upset. I think he just needs time to cool down, but he's talking about quitting. Okay. I'll be there soon. I cut the comm. And spoke out loud. Perceptor. Yes. I'm going out. Ravage will keep the twins in my room. You're going out again. Ratchet's having some sort of breakdown in the Hall of Records. Ah. Okay. I hope he's all right. I hurried to the Hall of Records to find Ratchet and Orion up in Orion's office. Ratchet stopped mid-rant when I came in. Orion, having never been on the wrong end of one of Ratchet's tantrums before, was somewhat worried for the orange and white mech's sanity. Soundwave. Ratchet said. You will not believe. What happened? I asked, trying to make sense of his furious thoughts. The department are slagging murderers is what happened. I got in to take my practical final and they had a slagging mech in there, dying. I tilted my helm to the side, not entirely sure what he was talking about. What? It wasn't a drone, it was a mech. Oh. During a practical exam, they usually had a lifelike, badly damaged drone for him to fix. If he managed to save the drone and do everything properly, he passed. I could just imagine Ratchet walking in to see a half-dead real mech, lying on the operating table. And they fragging expected me to repair him. Did you? Of course I did, he was dying? It took me a brain to figure out he was poisoned, but, I cannot believe they would do that. I can't go to this Primus Curse school if they do things like this. I won't be a part of it. There's no way that mech's poisoning was some sort of accident. They poisoned him, and he was going to die frag it. I wasn't sure what to say. And it's not just me. They do that to every single medical student. Part of the Primus Fragged medic code is a vow to heal and never harm. I'm not sure how they think they can get around that. He went to the head of department, Orion said quietly, and they told him it was part of the learning experience, and that if he couldn't handle it, he didn't belong in the medical program. And I'm going to quit. Ratchet said. I can't stay in this slagging academy one term longer, not after I know they're willing to do that to Mecha. It's murder. Ratchet, I said. Don't try to talk me out of this, you faceless coward. Ratchet, Orion said. That was kind of hurtful. Can you take this to someone in A authority? They got the mech from a prison, Ratchet said. He was on death roll. No one fragging cared if he died. It could have been Searchlight. That sort of thing could have happened to Searchlight. They're going to execute him anyway. I spent a drawer saving him and those fraggers are going to kill him anyway. I'm really sorry, I said, understanding his acute misery better than I wanted to. You're sorry. Ratchet snarled at me. Sorry about what? That I'm upset. No one cares about anything anymore, and if you do, they make you disappear. So you can fragging shut up, Soundwave. You've never stood for anything in your fragging life. Ratchet, calm down, Orion said. I will not. I just saved the slagging life of someone they're going to execute in a few warns. He picked up a datapad and threw it. It would have hit the wall and probably broken, but I reached out and caught it. If this is what being a medic is, I don't want to do IT. And you can frag off, Orion. You don't understand. He buried his faceplate in his hands. He gets like this sometimes. I said to Orion over an internal comm. I'm really sorry he said all that stuff to you. It's okay. I know he doesn't mean it. It did hurt, but I didn't need to admit that. I'm not going back next term, Ratchet grumbled, but I could tell the tantrum was dying out now. You don't want to quit, I told him, then waited patiently while he shouted profanities at me because he knew I was right. Orion worried about what Alpha Trion would think, should he show up? Eventually Ratchet calmed down enough to demand to know just exactly why I thought he didn't want to quit, and just how I thought he could justify that when his teachers and the department administration were condoning murder. I shrugged. Orion, can we go to Macadam's? I'm not going there. Ratchet said. I want an answer, Soundwave. Give me one reason I shouldn't quit. Think about it for a few warns before you make a decision, I said. Orion, we should go to Max and talk to your sparkling horde on the way. Orion nodded. I get it. Okay, yes. I think going to Macadam's is a good idea. Or at least getting some fresh atmosphere. Come on, Ratchet. I'm not going. Fresh atmosphere indeed. There's so much pollution you can barely vent in the city. Please. I said. Why do you care? I froze. I had asked Searchlight that question so many times. Enough times that I knew the answer. Because I'm your friend. Humphy, Ratchet said. You know what I'm like when I'm overcharged. We don't have to get anything, Orion said. Let's go. Ratchet grumbled on the way out of Orion's office and muttered to himself as we left the Hall of Records. We made Orion's typical stop to the vendor he got his energon goodies from. As usual, the mech offered to give him a discount, but he refused, despite the fact that he really could have used a discount. Along the way, we were apprehended by sparklings. Even more than usual. They all wanted to tell Orion everything they'd done in the past few warns, and he was very happy to listen to them. We came to a large group of them playing a game with a makeshift ball. They stopped and ran over to crowd around Orion. He knelt down to be closer to them and even, so he was considerably taller than the group of shouting, excited mechlings. He couldn't have been happier. Ratchet, on the other hand, just crossed his arms and scowled at them to warn them away from him. One of the sparklings had a lame hand. I'd been hoping he'd be here, and he was. Orion called him over. Hey Factor, he said, holding out an energon treat. How's your hand? Doing any better? I can move some of the fingers a little. He held it up and focused really hard on it. See. I hadn't seen anything move. That's really good. Ratchet shot a knowing look at me. You are not getting away with this, you sneaky glitch. Wasn't I? Move, Ratchet shoved through the crowd. Factor put his hand down and backed away, frightened. Let me see that. The sparkling held his hand close to himself and shook his helm. Factor, Orion said. This is Ratchet. He's training to be a medic. Can he look at your hand? He'll be gentle. The sparkling looked down, then cautiously came forward. The others all watched with bright, interested optics as Ratchet carefully took the hand in his and studied it. How long have you not been able to move it? I broke it and it never got better. When did you break it? The sparkling shrugged. Dunno. Does it hurt? Not real much. Ratchet spread the fingers out gently and the sparkling winced. The joints grated a little from rust and disuse. Ratchet had a low-level scanner, which he used to determine the problem. The little mech's self-repair systems had misconnected some of the wires in his wrist. If he wanted to fix the problem properly, he'd need things he didn't have, but he could just try to swap the wires. It wouldn't be hard. Shutter your optics, okay. Why? I'm going to do a magic trick. It'll hurt just a tiny bit, but at the end, I'll make Orion give you 2 more energon treats. Okay. Factor was a little hesitant, but Orion smiled encouragingly at him, so he shuttered his optics and put his free hand up to cover them as well. Ratchet pulled a hook tool out of subspace and slid it between the plates of the sparkling's wrist. The others all watched, wide-eyed, and Factor flinched, but didn't pull away. Just hold still, Ratchet said as he scanned the wrist again to see where he was aiming for. He used the hook on the end of the tool to disconnect the wires and then push them into the proper place. The sparkling was in pain, but he held obediently still, and it wasn't that much worse than it felt when he accidentally hit it against something. Okay, Ratchet pulled the hook back out. His self-repair can take it from there. Factor unshuttered his optics, then held up his hand. The ends of his fingers twitched, and he gasped, then slowly made the hand into a fist. Thank you. He jumped at Ratchet and threw his arms around the other mech's neck. Ratchet pushed him off and backed away. It's nothing, he muttered. Look. Factor held up his hand, wiggling his fingers. The others cheered. Don't do that so much right away. Ratchet snapped. You'll hurt yourself. That was amazing, Ratchet, Orion said. Anyone could have done it, Ratchet insisted. Sure, Orion thought. I got lots of mecha to look at that hand and they either said they couldn't figure out what was wrong or that you'd have to take him to a real medic, which would cost a lot. I guess Ratchet is a real medic, though. All right, Ratchet said quietly. Is anyone else hurt? He got to pop out a few dents and tighten a few joints. Orion was happy about that because they were all scared of medics, but they didn't seem to mind Ratchet. Ratchet, for his part, felt a sort of sudden intense concern for them. Maybe too intense. I understood why he didn't want to be a practicing physician. He cared too personally about everything. But he also didn't want to quit, and he wouldn't. Everything he'd said about the mecha, who'd prepared that test had been true, but he wasn't going to let it prevent him from learning medicine. We didn't end up going to McAdams after all. When Orion's supply of energon goodies was exhausted, we headed back to the Hall of Records. I won't quit, Ratchet said. But I'm worried. They shouldn't be doing that. It's entirely unethical. If they're willing to do that, I want to go into research. By the time I get there, will whatever I do help anyone, really? Those sparklings certainly won't benefit from any research I do. Medicine is getting more expensive. Every mech wants to get rich. Ratchet, Orion said. You can always find ways to help mecha. Don't worry. Orion, I suddenly remembered what Yucatron had said. Do you think things can continue the way they are? With so much of this sort of thing? I don't know, Orion said. I don't think so, Ratchet put in. Someone's bound to step up eventually. Maybe it would have been Searchlight if he hadn't. I nodded. Do you think there'll be a war? A war? Ratchet asked. Where the frag did you get that idea? Who's fighting who? A war. Primus, almighty, that's the stupidest thing I think I've ever heard. Alphatrion thinks we might have a war, Orion said. If things keep getting worse and the council keeps getting more corrupt. Eventually, Mecha will stop putting up with it. But I don't think it will get to the point of an actual war, especially if we can push for peaceful social change. Ratchet said. What do you mean we? You're a librarian, Orion, not a politician. Do you know Shockwave? Yes, Ratchet said. Though I haven't talked to him for Cortexes. He's going to run for a position on the council as the new representative of the academy. But he's just a student, Ratchet said. Are you sure? Why didn't I know about this? Yes, Orion said. I'm going to help him with his campaign, though. You two should as well. He can definitely use all the help he can get. Are either of you doing a lot over the break? Orion asked. Ratchet and I looked at each other. I shook my helm. Then you can help, Orion said. It'll be great. Shockwave will be really grateful. Ratchet, you used to want to go into politics, didn't you? I took a lot of classes if that's what you mean, Ratchet said. And I picked up things, I said. From Searchlight. I had been present for most of his homework and had heard enough to be at least somewhat helpful in organizing a political campaign. Would you like to help him? I nodded. I would be perfectly happy to try to get Shockwave on the council. He was a good mech, the sort of mech who might actually get things done and push for the right kinds of changes. All right, I guess, Ratchet said. But I do need to start studying for next term at some point. You have 12 to Cairns off, Orion said. He just finished his finals, and he's already thinking about studying. That was Ratchet for you. In any case, Orion said. I'll let Shockwave know, and then I'll let you both know if we're going to meet and talk about it, all right. I nodded. I guess, Ratchet said. We got back to the Hall of Records, and I left to go to Perceptor's house and finish helping him clean up. Rumble and Frenzy had painted on the walls, and we were going to need to paint them back their original color. The next morning, Orion sent a message to me on my datapad that we were meeting on campus later in the Orn, out in front of the law building. There were benches and tables there, so it was a good place to meet, but since it was on campus, I couldn't bring Ravage. Well, he could watch the twins and I'd make it up to him later. Perceptor and I finished repainting the walls halfway through the Orn, and that left me with several drawers of free time before I was supposed to meet with Shockwave and Orion, but then Breeze called me, and we talked about her potentially coming to Eacon in a few Cairns to visit us, and after that Perceptor wanted my help with something he was doing in his lab. By the time we were done with that, it was time for me to go. I was glad Perceptor's house was so close to the academy. It only took me 3 breams or so to get where I was going. Ratchet and Orion were already there, as was Wheeljack. Ratchet had just said something insensitive and Wheeljack's feelings were hurt. Shockwave had better show up, I thought, or this meeting was going to end before it started. Oh, hey, Soundwave, Orion said. Glad you could come. I hope Shockwave gets here soon. We were only waiting for a few more breams before Shockwave showed up. He brought some of his classmates, 2 femmes and a mech. Hello, he said quietly. Orion, Soundwave, Ratchet, Wheeljack, this is Accord, Paradigm, and Dion. They nodded. Nice to meet you, Dion said. I already know Orion. I didn't know Shockwave knew him, though. Everyone always seemed to know Orion. How did he meet so many mecha when he stayed in the Hall of Records all worn? Let's sit down, Shockwave said. We followed him to the nearest table. First let me thank you for being here, all 6 of you. But. He took in a deep vent and let it out. Especially Soundwave and Ratchet. I'm honored that you would be willing to help me with this. Frankly, it should be Searchlight here, doing this, running for a position on the council. It was what he was sparked for. Shockwave, Paradigm said, he needs to be confident. He should be standing here, running for this position. That said, Shockwave continued. If you're going to help me, you're going to need to be committed to this. We have a lot of work to do, and if we are to succeed, we'll have to put twice as much effort into it as our opponents. There have only been 1 or 2 occurrences of a student holding the position I'm aiming to hold, and none of them have been recent. I have to impress a lot of mecha and impress them deeply enough that they'll go against tradition. Paradigm, can we go over the voting procedure, just to give everyone an idea? Sure, Paradigm said, crossing her arms. To elect a new representative to the council, the whole school gets involved. There's a student vote and an administrator vote. The student vote counts for 1/4 of the weight of the vote, and the teacher administrator vote counts as 3/4. This becomes a problem. Shocky's a student, so we're likely to get a large percentage of the student votes, but the teachers and administrators are more likely to vote for one of their own. That's the biggest barrier to overcome in his election on the school end. Then the council has to vote on whether to accept his representation of the academy and make him a senator. If the school votes him in, but the council refuses him, then he's disqualified from the running, and they recast the vote without him. Essentially, we have one shot at this. Otherwise Shockwave is going to have to go the long way around, starting into politics after school and spending potential decaverns, working his way up to the council. So, Shockwave said. It's not the end of my career if this doesn't work. But I can't pass up this opportunity. Dion and Accord are going to be working on the student front. Paradigm's keeping track of everything for me. Orion, you have connections to the council and an almost endless wealth of information on past political campaigns, and Ratchet, Wheeljack, and Soundwave, you can help represent me to the school departments, if you like. Wait, Soundwave doesn't like to talk. Maybe I shouldn't ask him to. Okay, I said. As much as I didn't like to talk, I was good at it when I tried. It helped to know what everyone wanted to hear. Are you sure you don't want to do something else? I nodded. All right. Thank you. Shockwave, Ratchet said flatly. Yes. I'm not on very good terms with the head of the medical department right now. Oh, Shockwave said. That's all right. Like I said, that's just an option, and in any case, I'm really the one who has to talk to everyone, so don't worry about that too much. You can probably help come up with ideas for the campaign too, since you were going into politics at some point. And Searchlight must have talked about it once in a while. I nodded. Another obstacle we're going to have to deal with, Shockwave continued. Is that there are lines I don't want to cross. I won't give up everything just for this opportunity, and I refuse to be anyone's puppet. I don't just want to quietly push for things that will help the school. I want to push for important changes, maybe even some unpopular ones. We don't have to talk about that too much in the campaign, but I don't want to hide it either. I disagree with a lot of the recent legislation the council has passed. I might not tell them that to their faceplates, but it still might impede my ability to get support, especially from the council. I have to be impressive enough that they accept me anyway. Shockwave, Ratchet said. Do you have your position on current political issues and policies written out? I do. I'll send you all copies. When are the elections? I asked. At the end of next term, he said. So we've got a whole quarter of a form, but I need to be more prepared than the other candidates. So I'm starting right now. We won't want to start campaigning really hard until halfway through next term, but I do want to make every Mick aware of who I am before that, so they're ready when I run for representative. I need a framework of support before I run. So I'll have something to launch my campaign off of. Does that make sense? I nodded. So, Shockwave said. Are you all willing to do this? It will mean a lot of work. You know I'm in, Orion said. And I'm in, Wheeljack said. I might not really know what I'm doing when it comes to this sort of thing, but you can always count on me to support you. Shockwave nodded. Thank you. I'm in, I pledged. I trust you, and it's what Searchlight would have, yeah. Ratchet sighed. I'll help some, he said. But I'm not good with mecha, and I'm always busy. And you know the 3 of us are in, Dion said, glancing at Accord and Paradigm. For certain. Okay, Shockwave said. Let's get started then. Here are the first things we need. Shockwave and Paradigm laid out the beginnings of the plan, and gave everyone assignments. Orion's job was to look up past campaigns in the archives and to stay on top of current events. I volunteered to look over his views and start working on how he could present them to various departments throughout the academy so as to convince them to vote for him. For now, Ratchet was going to help Orion and I where we needed it, and Wheeljack would eventually be in charge of designing posters and that sort of thing. He'd be good at that, provided he could restrain himself from making them too exciting. It was dark by the time the meeting was over. We planned to have another 1 and 2 orns. Well, I wasn't going to be completely bored over the break. I wasn't going to have any free time either. But that was all right. Yucatron and Alpha Trion seemed to think there was going to be some sort of war. For once, I agreed with Orion, though. If violence wasn't necessary, if there was any other way by which we could repair our damaged government, we had an obligation to try and solve things peacefully. Shockwave could do it if he had enough help. What he wanted was on a scale that he couldn't accomplish alone, and I was willing to share some of the work. I went back to Perceptor's house for the off cycle, but didn't get much recharge because I stayed up late thinking, and then woke up after only a few drawers from a nightmare about neurosis. When I couldn't get back to recharge, I got up instead and started working on what Shockwave had sent me. They had a lot of time, but they wanted to be out of the early developmental stage by the end of the break, so we had a lot of work to do. Shockwave's first priority as a representative of the academy would be to push the views and interests of the school itself, so he needed to know exactly what those views and interests were. That would require interviewing a lot with the administration, but before that, during the break, there were a lot of things he could read. Much of the administration was gone over the break, but the Grand Headmaster was still there. Shockwave would need that mech on his side if he was going to pull this off, so we were doing a lot of research on him and his views. I also put in some time to research the other heads of departments and individual teachers. We had Perceptor on our side, of course, and he could help us represent Shockwave to the various science departments. We'd probably have a decent amount of support from them without even trying. Shockwave was well known and well liked among the Academy's scientific community. Other departments, we need to work on. Orion did a good job keeping up with current events and helping out with the campaign strategies. My job, more and more, became assessing various department heads and coming up with approaches that would get them on our side. Shockwave's friends from the political science department worked on publicity and getting Shockwave's designation into the processors of as many mecha as possible. Shockwave sometimes came off as quiet and unassuming, and he'd always been a little shy, but when he decided he was going to make something happen, it happened.